While I do love my story games, I love a good multiplayer game too. Your Helldivers, Marvel Rivals, Fortnite, and one of my favorite online games used to be Red Dead Online. I sunk hundreds of hours into that game, and when I look back, I have no idea why. I constantly complained about it. Every update we got, I'd become more frustrated and fed up with the creative decisions Rockstar took with the game.
Get this shit off me! Get this beta shit off me!
I just wanted to live out my cowboy fantasy in an online setting, and I never got that. The game had a troubled beginning and middle, and an absolutely tragic end to its story. So in this video, I want to take a trip down memory lane and talk about why the game failed and how its death could have been prevented. Let's start this video off by taking a look at the timeline of Red Dead Online's life cycle. The Red Dead Online beta, quote unquote, started on November 27th, 2018. During this point in time, the game was severely lacking content. The only thing to do was PvP modes, repetitive free roam missions, and grind skin in the Valentine sheep. Outside of that, there was nothing to do. A lot of people call these the Dark Ages, but personally I like to call it the make your own fun stage. When a game is empty and there's no content, players can get quite creative. For example, something me and my online friends would do is have fistfights on top of a waterfall. We'd also drive wagons off the waterfall, lasso each other off the waterfall, throw ourselves off the waterfall, pretty much anything including a waterfall essentially, and that's just my experience. I'm sure plenty of other players can tell you about their personal memories of doing random wacky stuff in the game during this period. And in a sense, the game at this time was almost better off than it is now. I mean, aside from the fact that in the beta, quote unquote, the game was super buggy, the in-game economy was insanely overpriced, all the missions were boring and underpaid, and it was all an attempt to get you to buy the gold bars. But apart from that, the concept of players making their own fun was a special moment in time for the game. From launch to the Frontier Pursuits update, the game only received small content updates that included bug fixes and new small-scale content. Things like new weapons, clothes, missions, addition of daily challenges, dynamic events, and poker. All nice quality of life changes, but nothing major in terms of size. Red Dead Online officially ended its beta, quote-unquote, on May 14th, 2019. After 4 months without any update, and nearly a year of waiting for its first large update, Red Dead Online received the Frontier Pursuits update on September 10th, 2019. With this update, the game introduced roles, which were supposed to be the game's main attraction, but in my opinion, they failed to live up to their full potential. That's all I'll say on them for now, since we'll cover them more in depth later. On December 13th, 2019, the Moonshiner's update was released. For what the role is, it's pretty decent, but I think it could have been improved. Again, we'll get to that later. And I guess it's also worth mentioning two things the update brought with it. One, a properties tab. This hinted that they were planning to add more properties to the game, but unfortunately the game died before that could happen. And two, a slate of new story missions were added that no one really cared about. So yeah, now you know. On July 28th, 2020, the Naturalist update was released, giving us an extremely lackluster update. I'm not really going to talk about it too much, because I don't really care about it at all. I remember being very disappointed when this was announced, and if I remember correctly, so was everyone else. We already had a role centered around hunting animals in the trader role, yet we got another role centered around hunting animals. Some defenders of the update might say it's unique because a fox is white instead of orange, or a bear is red instead of brown. And all I have to say to that is, no. Just no. July 13th, 2021, the Blood Money update was released. Rockstar gave us, yet again, another lackluster update not worthy of being a standalone expansion. The content was just not substantial enough to be its own update. The things introduced would have been better as a small part of a large role. What role, you may ask? Again, hold on, we'll get there. A year after Blood Money was released, Rockstar officially announced they were ceasing to produce large content updates for the game in favor of diverting resources to GTA 6. Although, I find it funny they still kept pushing resources into GTA Online at the time, and still do currently. I wonder why that is. But, with this announcement, the final nail was hammered into the coffin, and Red Dead Online officially died. So, what went wrong exactly? How could a multi-million-dollar company and one of the most critically acclaimed game studios mess this up so badly? We'll discuss that as we talk about the wasted potential of Red Dead Online. To me, you can sum up in one word why this game failed. That word is design philosophy. Wait, that's 2 words. You could sum up in 2 words why this game failed. Design philosophy. I personally think the devs of Red Dead Online were trying to make the wrong game. They attempted to take the game design that worked for GTA Online and apply it to Red Dead Online. This doesn't work. Why? Because they're 2 completely different games. They may both be open world third-person shooters made by the same developers, but they're completely different in all other regards. When someone says that Red Dead Redemption is just GTA with horses, they're wrong. Very wrong. The pacing, atmosphere, etc., all entirely different. It's like saying Uncharted and The Last of Us are the same, or Splinter Cell and Ghost Recon. Yes, there are some similarities, but to say they're the same game is too far. And because they're not the same game, they don't have the same audiences. If they did, Red Dead wouldn't have sold only 35% of what GTA has sold. I don't mean this disrespectfully, but GTA attracts a more broad, casual, and immature audience, while I would say Red Dead attracts the opposite. For GTA's audience, a bland, unimaginative grindfest works for them. But for Red Dead's audience, a hardcore, thoughtful, and more mature audience, for the most part, you need a gameplay experience that is reflective of them. So, if I was Rockstar, and I wasn't a greedy asshole, and I actually wanted to make Red Dead Online the best game it could be, what would I do? Well, I would make Red Dead Online a pseudo-MMORPG geared towards providing an extremely immersive role-playing experience. I would make it the closest thing to Westworld in real life. You know, minus the murder robots. And the sad thing is, Rockstar had all the potential and capability to do this, but threw it away. So, let's talk about some ways they could have done this, starting where any great RPG starts, the character creator. Now, for the most part, the system they have is fine, but why have fine when you could have good, or great, or something even better than that? As it is in the game right now, your character doesn't truly feel like a character. I have 3 main changes I believe would change that. Voice, dynamic hair, and names. Number 1, voice. I don't know how much this bothers everyone else, but I really hate the silent character shtick. I hated it in BioShock, the old COD campaigns, GTA Online. I even hated it in Baldur's Gate 3, and it's very hard to find things to complain about in that game. With this game, I was hoping they would make a change, but again, we got mute characters. Look, it might have been a tough task, but I don't think it was an impossible task. Time-consuming, expensive, and a lot of effort, yeah, but not impossible. I believe they could have given voices for our characters, similar to the way the Saints Row franchise does it. 1 male, 1 female, of unique dialects each. You could have a southern accent, a New Yorker, an Englishman, Irishman, etc. Voices with discernible accents that would tell you they're from a particular region. The amount this would improve role-playing and immersion would be immeasurable. I can look at my character and imagine them being from Ireland, but if they have an actual voice with an Irish accent, I no longer have to imagine. That thought becomes real. That's one of the biggest things I love about voice actors and the art of voice acting. An actor can take a bunch of moving pixels and breathe life into them, taking something that's artificial and make it feel like it's not. So why not let them use their talent in a way that's never been done before? We do have multiplayer games that have characters speak. Overwatch, Rainbow Six Siege. The characters speak to each other at the beginning of the match and during. But these are pre-created characters speaking pre-scripted lines. What I'm suggesting is entirely dynamic dialogue spoken from a custom-created character. As far as I know, no one has ever done that. Rockstar's biggest concern as to why they wouldn't want to do something like this is money. So, here's how I tackle that problem for them. Rockstar already loves using unknown actors, so how about you go a step further and hire the unknown of the unknown? Someone who's only been in small roles in like 3 movies, been a dead body on a TV show, or done an audiobook here or there. Someone who's cheap to cast but has demonstrated enough talent to showcase they're not a bad actor. Someone who needs a shot to prove themselves. So go ahead and let them. Give those people a shot. It's a win-win-win for everyone involved. The actors get a paycheck and exposure for bringing to life a never-before-seen mechanic in the online mode of one of the best-selling games of all time. The player base gets to experience this never-before-seen mechanic and have a fun and immersive experience, and Rockstar saves money casting these actors. See? Win-win-win. Even our character just having the ability to speak makes the stupid Leclerc and Moonshine missions better. The stupid missions wouldn't be so stupid if my character just actually responded to what is being said to them and didn't just blankly 1,000-yard stare into the guy. And the biggest reason of all for why I wanted this to be a feature, greeting and antagonizing. If our character could speak, you could implement the feature into online. I wanted this so badly. But sadly, Rockstar missed the opportunity. Now I just cry at night knowing we'll never get this. Now, number 2, dynamic hair. Another cool feature from story mode that was missed out on was dynamic hair growth. So, I don't know how the technology for it works exactly. I don't know how challenging it would be to implement the feature when all of the characters are completely different in appearance. For all I know, this feature would be harder to implement than allowing our characters to speak. Although I would have loved to have the feature in online, I understand how that may have been a tall task. But could you at least make the pre-rendered beards you gave us fit? I'm going to put some clips on the screen and ask you to pay attention. Do you see it?
You see?
Do you see the gap of space in between the face of my character and his beard? Okay, not having any dynamic hair growth features in the game, it sucks. But I can get over it. But this? Come on. I'm not going to linger too long on this point. I just want to say I wish we could have gotten dynamic and natural looking hair for our characters, or at least one or the other. It would have helped with immersion a lot. Lastly, number 3. Names. This is probably the most unrealistic of my wishes for the character creator, but how cool would it be if we could choose a first and last name for our character, and the NPCs would actually call you by those names? Here's what I'm thinking. Instead of typing in your character's name, you would be given a list of names to choose from for your first and last name. If any of you have ever played the UFC games, you know if you choose from the list of last names, Bruce Buffer will announce your character by that name. Since Bruce already had to record the lines and they were being used for the in-game version of real-life fighters, EA let you use them for your character to have your character's name be announced since the name was already in the game's code. So, what if, hypothetically, Rockstar did something similar to this? Rockstar records the names being said by NPCs, takes multiple different takes, then plucks a random one out, and edits it together with a random NPC greeting. Or our characters could introduce themselves in the missions and the people we're working for would call us by name. I've only did a little bit of coding, I didn't get very far, but from the little I did learn, I think technologically, Rockstar could have pulled this off. And monetarily, they definitely could have. I actually made a mistake earlier. Rockstar is not a multi-million-dollar company, they're a multi-billion-dollar company.
Billions. With a B.
Again, I understand this feature would be hard to implement, but again, also, it'd be really cool if it was. So, that's how I think the character creator should have been done. And now that you have a character, what is the first thing you do with them? You step into the world. So let's talk about how if all the points I just mentioned were a part of the character creator, how it would impact the world building, along with some additional features I would have loved to seen added. So in the names point, I said NPCs could call you by your name during a random greeting. But you may ask, how would they know your character's name? Well, at first they wouldn't, but with the return of a feature from Red Dead 1, they would learn of your name. I think Red Dead Online would have been the perfect opportunity to bring back the fame meter from Red Dead Redemption 1. And I just want to say, when I thought about this, I felt like a genius. Because it would just fit so perfectly. I understand why they didn't bring the feature back for story mode. It makes sense because Arthur is an outlaw. He's trying to stay hidden. So if he starts getting famous in a certain area, the Pinkertons would come looking. I get that. But why not put it into online? Even without the character creator improvements I suggested, this would be cool. But with them, I've already said this, but it'd be so cool. Here's a little scenario for you. You named your character something like Bob Jackson. Yeah. You have the bounty hunter role, you have high fame and honor, and you're walking down the muddy street of Valentine. You hear whispers of your name. The NPCs are talking about your exploits as a bounty hunter. One of them looks at you and says, "Mr. Jackson, thank you for dealing with those no-do-gooders. You made Valentine a whole hell of a lot safer." And then you could greet or antagonize or just ignore him. I mean, come on. How cool of an interaction would that be in an online game? There's so many unique interactions you could do with this. You could have dynamic events where you're so famous that you have the Wild West version of paparazzi hound you, or a journalist wants to talk to you for an interview. Maybe someone wants to duel you to steal a bit of your fame. Now we could have NPC duel events. And think about how all of the suggestions I gave would improve the current dynamic events we already have. It'd be so cool to have NPCs you rescue and help recognize you and call you by name. I'm just realizing this now, but I know I've said it'd be cool a lot, but come on, it'd be cool. How about everyone takes a shot every time I say it, huh? I'm kidding, don't do that. For legal purposes, that was a joke. I think the biggest reason I wish my character could talk, apart from greeting and antagonizing, is that I think it would have prevented the crime in Red Dead Online from being dumbed down. I think a large part of why it was because our character is a mute. Compared to story mode, you can't rob people at gunpoint, you can't silence them with only a threat, you have to be an extremist. The only way to rob NPCs is by killing then looting them, and the same for witnesses. You can only stop them one way. And I think this is pretty dumb. If you have a good mechanic in a video game, why would you remove it? Funny thing is though, I don't even think they would have to implement the voice feature for crime to be good in the game. They could have found another way to do this. For an example, you could just have our character do some menacing caveman grunts with some punches in there, ooga booga style, and I think that'd get the point across to the NPCs that they're being robbed or that they need to be quiet about what they just saw. So with everything I just said, it all involved NPCs and how you, the player, interact with the world and how I felt it could have been improved. But now let's talk about the other half of that, how you, the player, interact with other players. So the most fun I had with this game when recording the footage for this video was when I engaged with other players. And to me, That's what I think the game should have strived to achieve, to get players to interact with one another. Earlier I said the game should have tried to be a pseudo MMORPG, and I still think that's true, but I feel that it shouldn't be the design philosophy, but more so the model to design the game around what the actual design philosophy should be, which I think should have been a simple question. Throughout development, Rockstar should have asked themselves, how can players build moments with each other in a fun, engaging, and dynamic way within the open world of Red Dead Online? Because that's where all the fun in the game is at. It's not bounty missions, it's not story missions, not selling missions, not even PvP modes. It's spontaneously fishing with someone. It's getting drunk in a speakeasy, slapping each other, dancing. It's beating NPCs up with another player, only to end up fighting each other. And it's going to the bathroom, then coming back, and seeing yourself being dragged with a lasso by a guy on horseback. Those are the moments that give Red Dead Online the opportunity to be a special game, but they don't happen all the time, and Rockstar didn't do as much as they could have in terms of trying to make interactions like these happen. And everything I said about giving our character a voice and name and the fame meter, all of that isn't even necessary. It's just things that I think would make Red Dead Online even more special of a game and make the world feel truly alive when you're not interacting with other players. But let's talk about some ways that could have made those player interactions more common. So, here's what I think they should have done. And I will say, my opinion may be a little controversial, but I think Rockstar should have made griefing and PvP in the open world more commonplace. I know. Throw your tomatoes, go ahead, it's alright.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Yes, I think griefing should have been made more common, but while it should be more common, it should not come without high risk. This may not make sense now, but with what I have to say about roles later, this decision will make a lot more sense. Let's talk about it a little bit more. Obviously, I don't like griefing. The people that do it piss me off, but they could be a healthy part of the game's ecosystem if it's designed properly. For it to be fun, and so you don't have a server full of just a bunch of assholes, you would need to have a system similar to skill-based matchmaking. I'm thinking of a system that tracks how much of a griefer, anti-griefer, or passive player someone is, and splits the server equally into those archetypes or roles. Then you could design actual roles that align with these types of playstyles. Here's a diagram for you to help with what I'm visualizing. So you have 3 playstyles: griefer, passive player, anti-griefer. It starts with the griefer. A passive player is enjoying themselves, minding their own business. The next thing you know, they're getting shot at. From here, the passive player can take on the role of anti-griefer and defend themselves, or they could run and elicit help from an already active anti-griefer, who would be a particular role that I have not yet mentioned. And with what I would have changed the bounty hunter role into, they would be in the anti-griefer category, but more so an Avenger type than an active protector of players. All this talk of anti-griefers, griefers, passive players, blah 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 blah, it sounds a little goofy now, but trust me, it'll make sense. But anyways, moving on. To make griefers more common, I'd make them more dangerous and give them more tools. The blip system Rockstar has is actually really good. I like not knowing where any players are. It's really fun to be riding around and then you stumble upon someone surprisingly. I like the system, but I'd change one thing. Don't let me see the aggressive red players across the map. In fact, do the opposite. Don't let me see them until they're in my vicinity and are an immediate threat. It'd make running into a player like that very tense and scary. Another tool that'd be a cool addition to enable griefers is player robberies. Remember how I was saying we should be able to rob NPCs earlier? Yeah, give us that and let us rob players too. I understand how this could be abused or really frustrating for the player being robbed, so I'd say only allow the player robbing to be able to rob a player of $10, similar to how you can only max bet $5 in the poker games. And they can't rob that player again until an in-game day has passed, which would be 48 minutes in real time. Now with this next feature, I don't know how you'd implement it exactly, but you kind of need it to have that risk I was talking about. What if, along with NPCs, we the players can report crime from other players, either if it happened to you or another player? So if you're robbed, you'd be able to go to a sheriff and report it. I haven't thought of how you'd make a feature like this work, but maybe you could have buttons to ignore the crime you saw as well, if you wanted. I think not being able to report a crime after being killed would be pivotal, so the person that did the crime wouldn't want to deal with you if you didn't want them to. I don't know, there's a lot to think about with this. What is more important though is the bounty system. When you kill an NPC, you get pennies on your bounty, and that's fine. Keep that way. But change how much goes on your bounty for killing players. Personally, I think it should be $25 if players or NPCs manage to report a murder of a player from another player. This is the risk I was talking about earlier. Sure, you can grief, and you're given tools to be able to do it and hide, but if you're caught, there's some consequences. And how big those consequences are will become apparent when we talk about roles. But before we talk about how they could have been improved, we need to talk about what's wrong with them. I don't know if it's just because I'm an old man now and my taste in games has changed, but how did I find these roles enjoyable? And an even better question, how the hell did I find GTA Online enjoyable? Because basically they have the same design. Both games have you do bland, tedious, repetitive tasks that make money. I don't know about you guys, but I already do bland, tedious, repetitive tasks at work in real life to make real money. I don't want to come home and do that again for fake money. The missions aren't fun, engaging, or unique at all. I can explain to you how one mission goes, and you'll know how every other mission will go. Whether or not it's a resupply mission, bounty mission, or sell mission, it'll be the same. Here it is. You start at point A. You either shoot things while on the way to point B, or go to point B and shoot things at point B. Maybe you grab something or capture somebody. If point B isn't your end destination, then you either go back to point A, or you go to point C, and that's the gameplay loop every single time. You do the same thing over and over and over again.
Did I ever tell you what the definition of insanity is? Insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again, expecting shit to change. That is crazy.
And this mission design is used for every role. No matter if you're playing the bounty hunter, trader, moonshiner, etc., you'll be doing this exact gameplay loop. Here's some examples. The moonshiner is completely passive for most of the role. The only action you get is the sell mission, and like I said, it's the same every time. Drive slowly, stop for the roadblock, drive slowly again. Outside of that, you're not doing much other than giving Marcel some berries and stuff and letting him cook.
Let him cook! Let him cook now! Let him cook! I said let him cook!
The bounty hunter is the same. The trader is probably the only one with a decent loot outside of its sell missions. Hunting in the game is pretty fun. Sometimes it's nice to just enjoy the nature of the world and do a little serene hunting. But let's look at some ways a couple of these roles could have been better. So we'll be talking about the Moonshiner and Bounty Hunter roles and ignore the other ones. We won't be talking about the Naturalist role because I really don't care about it at all. The Trader and Collector, I don't have any ideas for how they could have been improved, since most of my improvements are based on forcing players into interactions with each other. And I couldn't think of a way to do that with those two. Plus, I don't really think they should. Not every role has to have you play with other people. It's fine to have roles that work better solo, to have a nice balance. But anyways, fanfic time. Like I said earlier, the Moonshiner is a decent role, but it's not because of the gameplay loop or story missions, but because of the speakeasy. This niche hub/activity is 80% of why I like the role. So with my idea, it's mainly geared towards forcing players to interact in the speakeasy more often, but I changed the way the business works to achieve that. And the Moonshine production process is more engaging because of it. The sell missions are still boring though. They'll always be boring. Let me explain how my rework, so to speak, works. First off, I'm just going to say I'm not entirely sure I understand how Rockstar's customer system works.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm kind of retarded.
But it doesn't really matter since my idea is better anyways. I think the way the customer system works right now is you have customers who only want a certain flavor, but you can only sell to them before the timer resets. And if it does reset and you want to sell to them again, you'd have to wait for them to come back after the timer resets again. Which is fine, it works. But it could be better. Here's my idea. I think you keep the customers only wanting one moonshine flavor, have each customer represent a flavor, so to speak, but instead of having a time till buyer's reset timer, you have a cooldown timer before you can sell to a customer again once you've made a sale to them. You make it 2 in-game days, which would be 96 minutes or 1 hour and 36 minutes in real life. And with the addition of the feature I thought of, this would flow perfectly. That feature is customer loyalty. So the more you sell to a customer, the more loyalty you would build with them, which gives you more money from selling to them. But the downside is that when you trade with one customer, building loyalty with them, you'll lose loyalty with the other customers. Not as much as you gain when selling, but it's still a loss. So this way it becomes a balancing game of trying to manage high loyalty between all of the customers, which, in my opinion, is more fun than the system they have now. But making the Moonshine production system better wasn't even my goal. I said I wanted to have players interact with each other in the speakeasy more often, and I do. But you need this version of the system with another one of my ideas for players to go in speakeasies more often. And my other idea is that the special Moonshine flavors should actually be special. Hot take, I know. In the game, there's no actual difference between any of the flavors. When you're making moonshine, your speakeasy will put up in stock whatever you're currently producing. If you're making the poison poppies flavor, for example, your speakeasy will serve the poison poppies. But whenever you or other players drink it, there's no difference from drinking it versus the berry cobbler or spiced island or wild cider or etc. flavors. So how about they actually have a difference? The moonshines should have had unique, strong, long-lasting bonuses when drinking them. Kind of like the special camp stew recipes, but even stronger. And this is where the player interaction part comes into play, because the only way to be able to drink these special moonshines would be through your own business or another player's. But with the design decision I provided earlier of having to constantly switch between making different moonshines to maintain high loyalty between all of the customers, you wouldn't be able to always make the moonshine that has the bonuses you want. So you would have to go to another player's speakeasy to get that moonshine, which drives player engagement. You want the moonshine that slows down Deadeye Drain for 3 days, or the one that reduces damage taken, but you can't make those ones right now because you're trying to keep your customers happy? Well, go down to a fellow bootlegger's speakeasy who has those drinks, buy one, sit down, and watch the band for a little while. Maybe you'll even end up dancing. And to add a little bit extra to this, the money you or another player spends on the moonshine should go directly to the player and not to a random void, as Rockstar likes to do. If you buy a shot of moonshine for $1, it should go to the player that owns that speakeasy. It'd just be a nice little touch. That's all I have for this role, nothing major. The bounty hunter role, on the other hand, the changes I have for this role are pretty drastic and very ambitious, but if this is what Rockstar did with the role, I'm gonna say it'd be cool. I hope you don't have alcohol poisoning by now. The bounty missions they have now are fine, I guess. I don't really like them. It's the same point A, point B, kill thing, point C design I discussed earlier. And the legendary bounties aren't that much different. Just because a lady camps in an armored wagon or a guy wears a suit of armor, it doesn't make the mission fun or unique. I guess technically it does make it unique since those elements are absent from any other missions, but they're not special in any way. But it doesn't really matter if the design of those missions are good or not, because for what I think the role should have been, those missions would be purely supplemental to the main experience. And my idea is this. The bounty hunter role should have been a PvP focused role where you hunt players majority of the time. But you may say, you could already hunt player bounties in the game. Yes, that's true, but it's bland, basic, and not the main focus of the role. The dumb missions are. So flip it around, make player bounty hunting the main focus. Because right now, player bounty hunting is not only rare, but it could also be so much more in depth. This role, and another hypothetical one that doesn't exist, is also the reason I wanted griefing to be more commonplace. They're the high risk a player like that would have to be aware of. So, fanfic time again. With this role rework, I have a dream, okay? I have a very particular image in my head, a vision, a particular scenario that could play out. I'm going to describe this particular scenario while explaining the mechanics. So imagine you're Bob Jackson again. You're looking for your next bounty. Instead of accepting a pop-up, you would get a player bounty from the bounty board. The board would have a dedicated section of player bounties. Once you pick up the poster, there would be a description of the bounty, which would be whatever the character is actually wearing color scheme wise. I think it'd be a really neat detail. It'd have their name also, gamer tag, and or the character name. Then from there, you'd be given the search area, which would be the entire state they're currently in. This may sound like it'd be too hard to find a player like this, but 2 things. 1, it's part of the fun having to actually search and track someone to find them. And 2, you'd be given tools to help your hunt. Continuing the fantasy scenario, let's say the bounty poster you picked up was from the Valentine bounty board. When you got the search area, it was in New Hanover. That's already a good start for you, but it gets even better because let's say the bounty goes to West Elizabeth shortly after you picked up the poster. Now the search area is updated to that state. And when you look at the map, the only way for them to get there from New Hanover is by crossing the Dakota River. So now you have a measurement of how far away they are from you, and it's not that far. So you go there, and when you cross the river, you use Eagle Eye. You see his tracks, and you start tracking him. You'd be able to track players, whether it be their horse tracks or their footprints. This tool would make the Eagle Eye mechanic so much more useful. It had to be buffed though, because as it is in the game right now, I'm pretty sure player tracks disappear pretty quickly, so they had to stay longer. Another nice detail to add would be if the bounty rides through the water, it'd hide their tracks. It'd be a pretty nice addition. So after finding the tracks at the river, you begin following them, but along the way, you somehow lose track of the tracks. Pun intended. I don't know how you did, but you did. Bear with me for the sake of the scenario. You notice Strawberry is right ahead of you. You enter the town, and you begin asking the NPCs if they've seen the bounty, pulling out the poster and pointing at it. A couple people say they haven't seen him, but one person does, and they say they saw him heading southeast. Blackwater is in that direction, so you make your way there. So what I'm imagining is you could ask an NPC if they've seen the bounty, which they'll answer yes or no, depending on if they have or not. And the bounty actually being seen is what would decide it. Like, it's not like you'd get this information regardless if the bounty went through Strawberry or not. No, the player would have to actually pass through Strawberry and be seen by an NPC for you, the bounty hunter, to get this piece of information. If they didn't go to Strawberry and completely avoided it, your trail would have gone cold. Which makes it cooler from the bounty side of things, because when you have a price on your head, you'd have to actually be wary of going into towns now for fear of being spotted. Which I guess would be a good time to mention it now, but in my version of the role, whenever the bounty is being hunted, he has no idea he is being hunted. So a player with a bounty has to be cautious at all times, because they don't know if the player riding up to them is just a random player wanting to say hi, or a bounty coming to capture them. But anyways, back to the scenario. So you're heading to Blackwater, and on the way the search area becomes a lot smaller and red. The bounty is currently wanted by the law. Another tool would be that if the player you're chasing gets wanted, the search area would become condensed and change its color to red for you to know they're actively wanted. It wouldn't be like this if they got into a gunfight with anyone, anywhere, just the law. If the bounty loses their wanted level before you can identify them though, the yellow search area will reappear. So, you speed towards Blackwater, but by the time you get there, the small red search area is gone and the yellow state large one comes back. But before then, you saw the red search area moving towards tall trees. You make your way there and see a player in the distance. You ride towards them. To make sure a player is actually the one you're hunting and not just some random player, you have to get close enough to hold L2 on them to identify them, or just get really close for it to be done automatically. In the scenario, once you identify the player, you find it's the bounty you've been searching for. You pull your gun out, hoping they'll come quietly. The bounty would be able to choose to surrender, or attempt to escape or fight back. Any of those options ending the hunt. If the hunt ends in favor of the bounty hunter would not be able to hunt that player again until 2 in-game days have passed. Now, it's important to mention why surrendering is an option, because some of you may say, surrender? Why would I do that? It sounds like something a pussy would do. The reason why is because 1, immersion, but 2, it might just be best case scenario for you to do so. In my version of this role, the difference in pay between dead or alive is very different and quite extreme, and both parties are enticed to resolve the hunt without bloodshed, more so the bounty hunter than the bounty. This way there's also more of a chase once the bounty is found. So here's the rundown of what I'm picturing. When a bounty hunter brings in a dead bounty, it would be a half pay decrease. So for example, if a bounty hunter brings in a bounty that was worth 100 alive, they'd only get 50 dead. This is to decentivize the bounty hunter from just running in and blasting the bounty's head off the first chance they get. I mean, they can still do that if they really wanted to, but the goal with the half pay cut is to entice the bounty hunter to not do that and attempt to capture first. But if the bounty forced the bounty hunter that was trying to capture them to get in a gunfight with them, and they were forced to kill them, the bounty wouldn't get off the hook for making the bounty hunter lose half their pay. Let's use the $100 example again. If a bounty was killed during the hunt, they would have to pay the original amount of their bounty plus what the bounty hunter lost out on. So they would have to pay $150, which is pretty bad. And it would get even worse the higher the bounty is. I mean, imagine if they had a $500 bounty. If they were killed, they would have to pay $750. You might think that's too big of a number and punishment for a player, but I'd say don't feel too bad for them. Remember, in my ideal Red Dead Online, for someone to get that high of a bounty, the best way to do it would be by killing players or robbing them. And doing the math, if they just killed players to get that bounty, they would have to have killed 20 different players or repeatedly kill and harass one player 20 times. So I'd say they deserve it a little bit. I would also say they deserve what happens to them if they were to be captured. And honestly, I don't know which one of these outcomes is worse. What would happen when you're captured is, same as it is now, you get put in a jail cell. The kicker though, you're going to be in there for a sizable amount of time. Right now, $1 equals 1 second of jail time. My idea is a little harsher, just a smidge. My idea is you would take the full amount of their bounty, divide it by 10, and whatever that number is, it's the amount of minutes they spend in jail, in real life time. Back to the example, if they had a bounty of $100, they would be stuck in the jail cell for 10 minutes. If it was a bounty of $500, it would be 50 minutes. Like I said, kinda harsh, but at the same time, if you don't want to pay all the money or spend time in jail, don't be a dick to other players.
If you can't do the time, don't do the crime. Okay, time's up. Now get out.
Unless you're willing to take the risks. And as the person with the bounty, you have to make a decision on whether it would just be smart to surrender and do your time, or risk losing a chunk of money in an attempt to evade the bounty hunter or kill them. This could make some really fun moments that players would cherish. Let's go back and conclude the scenario we've been building up, and use it as an example. So, when you confront the bounty you've been chasing, he puts his hands up, but then out of nowhere, he bolts, making his way through the trees. You chase him, you keep your gun unholstered in case he draws his. You chase some more, and as the bounty turns around some trees, a player with the trader role drives their hunting wagon right in front of them, and he's launched off his horse. You lasso the bounty quickly before he can get up, get off your horse, hog tie him, put him on the back of your horse, get on yourself, and ride into Blackwater. You put him in the cell, and you get a hard day's pay for a hard day's work. Now come on, that would be cool. Seriously though, think about how much fun players would have from a crazy chase sequence like this. And you're not always going to catch the guy. Some players would escape successfully. There would be times where you wouldn't even have a chase and you'd have an awesome gunfight instead. Maybe ones you get killed in, ones you don't. Maybe a bounty challenges you to a duel and you take him up on it, and the two of you duel on the spot. There's so many possibilities. Every hunt would be different because every player you're chasing is different. And getting chase is fun too because there's a tense atmosphere you would have at all times from having a high bounty. Never knowing if you're being hunted, never knowing that if you walk into a town, someone there will be your downfall. What game that you know of has that kind of experience? I don't know any. Rockstar had the opportunity to do something special like this and just didn't. It's a shame because if anyone could do it, it'd be them. This is probably the part of the video I've been most excited for. I want to discuss the roles we never got and how they could have looked if we did get them. There's 4 of them. Those roles are Rancher, Baron, Deputy, and Outlaw. I'm not going to go too in-depth since this video is too long as it is. I don't know how it got this long. Let's start with the Rancher first. It would have probably been the easiest role out of the 4 to make. Just give us a piece of land with a house and a barn and let us farm and take care of livestock. Simple. Basically, they should have just taken the Beecher's Hope chores from the epilogue and made an entire role out of it, but with more stuff in it. It would have been awesome to build a house and customize it. We could have bought different layouts, changed the exterior and interior, things like furniture, wallpapers. There could have been a kitchen upgrade, etc. Then they could have pretty much done the same thing with the barn, but give more opportunities with the upgrades it has. Maybe we could have added a blacksmith forge and it would allow you to make stuff for NPCs to sell to them, kind of like the custom bike shop from GTA Online. We could have added a horse pen and broken sold horses. Then we could have upgraded our storage, feeding troughs, things to boost capacity and efficiency. We could have ended up hiring farmhands to automate the production process. Because when I imagine this role, I imagine when you started out, it'd be a very active role where you have to do all the chores for it to make anything to sell. Milking the cows, feeding chickens, carrying sacks of grain and buckets of water, all of the stuff that's already in the game. They could have added more stuff too. We could have had like a sheep shearing minigame, for example. And for the sell mission, you'd have 2 different types. You'd have the bland wagon one we have with the trader and Moonshiner, because you'd have to sell your food-related products that way. But your cattle would have to be sold differently. You'd have to do a cattle drive, which is where you bring that feature back. I loved it in Red Dead 1, and we only got a tiny taste of it in Red Dead 2. The code is already in the game, so they could have added this easily. This whole role could have been a bunch of reused assets and animations, basically re-skinning the trader role, and people would have loved it. Because it fulfills that cowboy fantasy. What's more Western than a rancher? I think this one was an easy grab that Rockstar somehow missed. Who am I kidding? We all know the Naturalist update was a better use of update development time, right guys? Anyways, next role, Baron. I'm personally a huge fan of strategy games, city builders, resource management, games like Frostpunk, Crusader Kings, Tropico. I'm a big fan of these types of games. And I think this role should have tried to emulate the mechanics from those games on a smaller scale. Here's my idea how to make that work. You would manage 3 industries, each representing a different level of income. Lumber industry, low. Mining industry, medium. Oil industry, high. You would buy a factory, which is the hub for all of your industries from which you would manage. Traditionally, you would start with the lumber industry and make your way to the oil industry, as that is how the game progression system is designed, in my imagination, at least. There would be 3 resources to keep track of: materials, equipment, and product. Materials would be inserted into equipment so they could make product. You would get materials from buying them or stealing them. The equipment would need to be constantly repaired to make sure it doesn't break down. I was thinking maybe the products you made would be the same resource to repair the equipment, or you'd use the materials. It got time consuming to think about, but basically what I was imagining for this role was an inventory / micromanagement type gameplay loop to try and capture that feeling of owning a large business and having to micromanage so things stay in order. You'd be able to buy upgrades for automation and efficiency, like the Rancher. And to add to that feeling of owning a large business, the role's sell missions would be by boat, large wagon convoy, and train, which again would be actually cool sell missions. They would also give a large amount of money. $1,000 plus minimum. That's pretty much all I have for this role. Now let's talk about the ones I've been waiting the entire video to talk about. The Deputy and Outlaw. The reason I grouped these 2 together is because they're meant to work together to be the best they can be. I think of these 2 roles like yin and yang, like peanut butter and jelly, like Batman and the Joker, like another thing that complements another thing. So let's get into it. The outlaw is exactly what it sounds like. You're an outlaw. You'd be robbing. Store robberies, bank heists, train heists, stuff like that. The Blood Money update seemed like it wanted to do something like this, but Rockstar just couldn't help but ruin it with their icky design. I think Blood Money should have just been a small part of this role, and instead of going to Plankton and Sean for these small robberies, why not just make them dynamic events? The Stagecoach and Homestead robberies would be much better that way. They'd be like the money trucks from GTA Online. You see a stagecoach suddenly? Time to spontaneously rob it. Or you could just have both, planned stagecoach robberies and non-planned ones. And maybe for the role, the further you go into it, the larger the heist would be. Maybe when you get the role, the first levels allow you to rob stores. Maybe the amount you could rob from players would also be more if they implemented that feature. So it'd go up to say $5. That way you make 15 instead of 10. And as you keep climbing the levels, you get more opportunities. Bank heists, train heists, the amount you're able to rob from players goes up again. Stuff that makes it feel like you're actually becoming a more seasoned criminal. And if they were to do this, and if they were to put heists in the game, they would have to be in free roam, because that would be the entire purpose of the deputy role. That's my idea for the deputy, to be a direct counter to the outlaw. One last time, think about how cool it would be. Imagine you're robbing one of the banks with some friends, then a bunch of lawmen are standing outside. Most are NPCs, but then a few were actual players. The heist would be so much more fun that way. If you ask me, can I survive a dozen or so NPC lawmen while I'm robbing a bank? I'd say yes, without a shadow of a doubt. But if you ask me, can I survive a dozen or so NPC lawmen and a player deputy while I'm robbing a bank? The question would take more time to answer. And when I was saying earlier that you'd have an active anti-griefer role, this is the role I was talking about. The role would be there to protect other players from being griefed, at least in theory. And if you had the player witness system, you could have players report to other players who are deputies. Then that deputy has to go and deal with the player who is causing mischief. It's the whole reason I was saying I would make griefing more common, to give more purpose to this role. I would still add some PvE content though, because people aren't going to be robbing stores and banks and trains 24/7, and they shouldn't, honestly. I'll go ahead and say that right now. There should definitely be a cooldown timer until a bank or store can be robbed again. So, while both the deputies and outlaws are waiting, the deputies should have some things to do, which is where we once again bring back a Red Dead 1 feature. Bring back the Night Watch activity. I loved going around at night with the pooch, stopping crime. If they just took that, put it in Red Dead Online, add a few improvements, people would have loved it. For a lot of us, if we saw that, we would have gotten a lot of nostalgia and played it a ton solely because of that. And look, a simple way of not having a sucky PvE experience. Who knew that was possible? I'm not going to cover everything I would do with these two roles since this video is too long as is, but how about you tell me what you would do with it, and we'll talk about it down in the comments. At the end of the day, for all intents and purposes, Red Dead Online was a failure. It had an opportunity to be this amazing experience, but Rockstar squandered it. It's like if a trust fund baby blew all their money on drugs and other dumb shit. You were given all the tools and assets to do anything you wanted with your life, and you chose the worst possible path. But in this analogy, maybe I shouldn't put all the blame on the kid. Maybe some blame should be put on the parents. Maybe I'm being too harsh and expecting too much from them. And if I am, let me know please. On a serious note, I would love to know if anything I suggested is even possible in an online setting. Like, am I crazy, or could they have done these things? Anyone who's watching this, if you're a game dev or programmer, let me know. Can our custom created online characters have a voice and use it in the open world whenever we want? Can the dynamic hair system work on custom created characters? How taxing would it be for the game to have all the different permutations for character names, and then have NPCs speak those names? Is the player bounty hunting system I reworked in my imagination well designed? How about the other roles we never got? And even if you're not a dev or programmer, let me know what you thought about these ideas regardless.